We were talking about how we really need a better parental leave at Northeastern. So Esther actually put together a petition, and eventually, like a year or so later, Northeastern implemented a much more robust parental leave policy in 2018, which benefited so many people in our community. So that was a really celebratory moment, I would say, for our group and also for the university itself.
Hello, this is Samantha Saxby with another episode of Moms with Benefits, and I am so excited to have Allison and Melissa on with me today. Allison and Melissa are both co-founders and the current leaders at the Parent Affinity Group at Northeastern University. So welcome, Allison and Melissa.
Thanks so much for having us.
So we're going to dive into what is a parents group, how did they become leaders, what propels them to do this, what are their successes, what are their challenges. But before we do so, I want to just break down what a parent affinity group is in the context of the Northeastern University parents group. According to their website, the mission of Northeastern University parents is to provide personal and professional development for working parents and caregivers to create a strong network of fulfilled members at Northeastern University. So little background on how it began as a group in 2011 of 4 women who gathered for lunch occasionally and discussed new parenthood situations. So then as women started inviting their friends, this group grew to 65 women across Northeastern colleges and departments. And the group started to call themselves NU Moms. NU Moms is responsible for then petitioning Northeastern to improve their parental leave policy. Yay, which was launched in November 2018. The website says, today we affirm ourselves as an inclusive group to all parents and caregivers at Northeastern. And as of September 2023, we are a group of 430 people across all of Northeastern global campuses. This whole group is led by these two, Allison and Melissa. So, wow, awesome. Thank you again for being on here.
Great. And just a little asterisk to that, we are now close to 600. So even
Oh
from
my
the time, yeah, so we are growing very, very quickly.
Amazing. And so I know the formal website kind of touched on it briefly about the creation of it, but how would either of you describe the creation of your parent affinity group? How did it come about? And I think almost more importantly, what propelled you two individually to become a leader in this space?
Sure. So I can start with that. So when I got back from my first maternity leave, I definitely felt it was a shock to the system, right? So it's just I'm exhausted, I missed my baby, this was before COVID, so I wasn't working remotely at all, and I live a pretty far distance from Northeastern, so it was early mornings, late nights with traffic, and it really, as I'm sure many moms can relate to, it was just a real shock. And so I wanted to talk to people, like, how are we doing this? Like, how are we adjusting to coming back from such a huge life change and then, just starting to work as normal. And it was just a really, really difficult time. And so I reached out to a couple of moms that I knew had kids, recently, and just asked them to go to lunch. And that's kind of how it started. And really the foundation of NU Parents is community-based. So it's really empathizing with each other, asking questions, supporting, offering advice. And that's what we were doing in these small groups. And then word of mouth kind of started things. So someone had a baby, they came back from maternity leave. It's like, oh, come along, join us. And sooner or later, it was more about, we had to start booking conference rooms to actually sit and eat lunch. But it was all based on that same foundation. And then I'll turn to Allison for next steps.
So then Melissa, she went on maternity leave again for a second baby, yay, in 2016. And it was at that time that it was either I run the organization by myself or I bring in someone to sort of take Melissa's place for the time being. So we brought in someone by the name of Esther Cohen. She was sort of our co-chair actually for like the last 4 or 5 years, a big influencer and supporter of our organization. So we're really grateful to her. But we brought her in, and it was that time that we rebranded and, as you said earlier, sort of became an actual group and called ourselves NU Moms. And so people would reach out and say like, hey, I heard you run NU Moms. Like, how do I get involved with that? How do I get connected? So that was really nice that we sort of started, people knew who we were. At that time, Melissa was on leave, and we were talking about how we really need a better parental leave at Northeastern. So Esther actually put together a petition and put it online, and it gained many hundreds of signatures very, very quickly. And eventually, like a year or so later, Northeastern implemented a much more robust parental leave policy in 2018, which benefited so many people in our community. So that was a really celebratory moment, I would say, for our group and also for the university itself. I would say that they became a top employer in higher education for making that positive change. After that advocacy, campaign that we sort of went about grassroots, we were actually approached by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and that was in 2019. And they asked us if we wanted to be formally recognized as an affinity group, which is the same thing as an ERG. And so we, at that time, just said yes, we would love that, and rebranded to NU Parents. And we did that because we wanted to become more of an inclusive group to all parents and caregivers at Northeastern, not just moms. And so then COVID hit. And I'm sure that many people who are listening right now remember that it was probably the hardest time ever to be a parent. So scary. Everything was so uncertain. And we were all, schools were closing abruptly, daycare is closing down, and everyone shifted to remote work. And we were all being expected to basically do double time as a caregiver and as an employee and do both jobs equally well. So it was an incredibly stressful time for parents, and that was when our organization really took off. And, we had hundreds and hundreds of people begin to join NU Parents at that time. And I think they were just looking for some emotional and moral support and also a voice of advocacy. And that's where Melissa and Esther and I kind of came in. We then really formed a very close and effective relationship with the chief HR officer. That has made a big difference for our group. We work very closely with her. And as Melissa said earlier, we're now 600 people almost, just shy of 600. We'll celebrate that milestone when we get there, across all of Northeastern's global campuses.
That is incredible. Oh, go ahead, Melissa. Yeah.
I was just going to add, in terms of us being, why we decided to kind of lead this space, Allison and I have known each other since, I don't even know the date, Allison, 2006 or something. We worked together at another institution. We've seen each other through a lot of life milestones, and we're obviously friends as well. And we're both very much doers. So we, see a gap and we want to fill it. And we're also both leaders in our own respective colleges for our different co-op departments. It's beneficial. It's beneficial to us. It's beneficial to the community. It's kind of like a win-win both ways. And realistically, we were already doing it before it became an affinity group. So it just made sense for us to kind of continue on with that.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like there's so many gold nuggets that of your whole journey from start to where you are at today that listeners can take away from this. The heart of the story, at least that I hear, is that it started as a community and it's still a community. I think there's something to be said that no one can best support a caregiver like another caregiver. They get it. No one can best support a working parent like another working parent because they get it. And I love the community-based focus that you've had continue over the evolution of what it's been over 10 years, right? Since it originally started. That's incredible. And then to have the beacon, the gold kind of, I want to say the top echelon of enacting a paid leave policy at your organization directly from both of you and your other colleagues in the whole group's efforts, that is incredible. And I just think that should be celebrated. At Moms with Benefits, we work with a lot of individuals and organizations, and it feels like at first blush it's employees want a paid leave policy and employers are the ones that kind of hold the keys and the power in order to make that happen. And I think, yes, to some degree that's true, but I think part of kind of the missing ecosystem of making change actually happen is employees that are willing to be those change agents and willing to invest their time and to improve the culture. And I feel like I will call you two culture change agents. I don't know if that's kind of jargony, but do you think that's a fair thing to call you guys? Do you feel like that or not so much?
I mean,
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also want to say too, like we didn't do that alone. Obviously we have to give big kudos to our HR team at Northeastern who did a lot of the work to implement that. I think what we did as a group was show that there's a lot of people that want the change. And thankfully they took that and ran with it.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, so I'd love to hear more details on, so it's a parents working affinity group, like a working parents affinity group, right? That's the formal name of it since it's evolved from NU Moms, or do we still call it NU Moms?
We call it NU Parents.
NU Parents. Okay, love it. So at NU Parents, what are some specific examples or ways that you support the group of NU Parents?
So we actually started doing this, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where the group, again, had grown. And so we decided that every January we host a kickoff meeting. And in that meeting, Melissa and I, and Esther previously, we basically do an overview of all of the things that we did in the prior year and sort of summarize it for everyone. And then we also take that as an opportunity to then collect ideas and feedback from our members with the hopes of implementing that for that year coming into fruition. So, I think it's really important to be open to new ideas and to enable our members to join into leadership roles and opportunities. So most recently, we have been trying to, so we got a lot of requests from people where they say, like, I've noticed this and I think there needs to be a change. And I'm voicing that to you as the NU Parents co-chairs because you are the direct line of communication to senior leadership, right? Melissa and I and Esther had done this for years, but it really can be very time consuming. So where we've shifted over the last few years is to encourage folks to use their own voice. And the chief HR officer at Northeastern has been so wonderful, and she has really opened her door or her email box to anyone who wants to email her with something that they want to say. So we really encourage people to reach out directly. That allows them to grow their advocacy skills for themselves, and also it allows us to focus on the overall leadership of NU Parents, which is, it's a time commitment. So kind of going along those lines, that partnership with HR has been key. And so we meet quarterly with the chief HR officer. Again, I'm not sure that that's how it is in every organization, honestly. I think that our chief HR officer specifically has just really been a partner to us, and she's been really open about this. She is a parent herself, right? So as you said earlier, she gets it. And so I think that our organization is kind of near and dear to her as well. And so we bring our questions from our members or our own questions and any issues or trends that we're observing, and we bring those to the quarterly meetings with her and discuss those with her. And then I think it's also really important, a way that we support our members too, is that there are times like parental leave policy or during COVID, it was the return to work, like everyone was then told, okay, you've been remote for 18 months, it's time to come back. And, not everything was open yet. And some, daycares were still closed and things like that. So, it was a problem for some parents. And so we had to have that conversation with leadership at the university. And I think the key is really, going to the senior leaders with the issue, right, in a really respectful way, because, treat others how you want to be treated, but not just going with the issue, but coming with a proposal for a solution, right? We don't want to be the group that comes and is perceived to be complaining. We want to come in sort of like, as you said, as those change agents. And so that's where I think that Melissa and I have been successful, is that we always come with ideas for how to solve a problem. And then whatever, the information is that comes from the leadership at Northeastern, we then make sure that we get back to our members. I think that's really important too, to have credibility with our members of the group, is that we have to get back to them with whatever the answer was. And then last but not least, as the organization has grown, another way that we've supported our group, being 600 almost members, it almost kind of had become a little bit too big. I don't want to say too big, but just like Melissa and I hosted a town hall, or not a town hall, the opening meeting in January, and it was just a different feel for us than it had ever been. It was like there were well over 100 people on that virtual meeting, and it just felt different and honestly a little bit less intimate. And that's part of that community building piece, that intimacy of talking about challenges that you might encounter as a parent, or just seeking advice that in a large organization or group like that, you might not feel comfortable asking questions or being vulnerable, right? So we've implemented subgroups. That's something that we really have gone like full steam ahead on this year. It has a nice dual benefit, right? One is that we now have co-chairs of each of these subgroups. So again, we are kind of allowing people who are interested in moving into leadership at the university to take on these chair roles of each subgroup. We're also trying to foster that like smaller, tight-knit feeling and sort of bring that back to our organization that's grown quite a bit. So just as a quick example, our subgroups, they go kind of by age range or topic, right? So newborn infant, and then you're looking at like school-age children, elementary, middle school, high school, college age. And then we also have subgroups for LGBTQA and neurodiversity, adoption and foster parents, and like single or traveling parents and things of that nature, so that you can kind of like connect with your people, right? So I think, those are all sort of the ways that we've tried to really support our members.
And again, you started off with kind of this community feel, and I love that, to your point, it's growing so fast because there's such a need, but then it's like, okay, how do we make sure we follow our North Star of being a community resource? And so that took, creative problem solving, I'm sure. It took a lot of dialogue and ideas from everybody to figure out whether subgroups were the path forward. And now you're trying this subgroups concept, which I think is brilliant. And so another takeaway I had from your answer here was the term change maker, right? 100%. You guys are being change makers for your organization. In order to be a change maker, communication is really important. And so your concept of not necessarily just bringing a problem to the table, but bringing a solution or a couple solutions to the table, and then also understanding who are the people that need to be at the table to enact change. It sounded like you all, as representatives of the employees that are wanting a change, that's one seat at the table. There's the chief of HR, who sounds incredible. That's another seat at the table. There's senior leadership. That's another seat at the table. And so it is just, I think, very enticing or exciting to hear that those are all people that are getting to the table, listening to a problem, listening to solutions, and being able to make changes moving forward and evolving as things evolve. And so it sounds simple, but it actually takes a lot of communication, a lot of work, and I think that's just amazing. So thank you for the examples that you shared.
Thanks.
So when you think about your affinity group and the NU parents, how do you define success?
So I think our membership growth and engagement is definitely, a huge one for us. I did get confirmation that we are the largest affinity group at Northeastern. And so that was a big, yay, success. I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet is we use Microsoft Teams as our, sort of communication tool. Mm-hmm. And so we have a Teams channel for NU parents. And then we also have a bunch of subgroups, like the subgroups are represented as well by kind of those mini channels. And so the communication is very active, on our Teams channels. And I think, that's something where, while Northeastern did have Microsoft Teams before COVID, it really exploded, during COVID, post-COVID, for obvious reasons. But it's also a great way to find connection with people in a very quick way. And so oftentimes, we'll share updates through our Teams channel, but people will also ask questions through the Teams channel. And so you have all these different voices from all across Northeastern's network being able to kind of chime in. So just kind of being active in the Teams channel, I think is really important, and certainly how we do measure success as well. And then we also organize virtual and hybrid events basically throughout the year, and we usually host up to 4 or 5. And so that's something that we do at the beginning of the year, is really try and figure out, what types of events do we feel would be the most useful to the community and to the membership. And they're very well attended. Obviously we have 600 members. Not all 600 are coming to every session, but it is kind of a like pick and choose as you're interested and as your schedule allows. And so they're very well attended. as Allison mentioned before, like the direct results, from the advocacy, like that's another measure of success. So whether it's the parental leave or a care.com benefit that we've been able to maintain, there's a lot of different things where just being able to kind of use our voice and actually have something happen because of it is also a measure of success. But I think, kind of going back to that gold star that you mentioned, the connection, I think being able to be connected to people that, work at your organization that, depending on line of work, you would never really, interact with. So, and also because Northeastern is so large and so global, like you're not just going to bump into people. But we know each other, through NU parents, and we've maybe answered a question for someone, or maybe, they asked a question that I was able to help with, or vice versa. And so it's like, oh, that person works in the registrar. Like now I know someone in the registrar that I wouldn't have known. Like this is the way that we actually became connected. And so I think, again, it all comes back to the community connection.
Yeah, and that makes sense when you're talking about, folks being really active on your Slack channel or your Teams channel. To see that engagement shows that people are engaged in your community and what you're trying to say and are wanting to engage with each other. And so that makes a ton of sense. Are there things that you struggle with as leaders? Because I feel like what you're doing is incredible. I've heard you say it's time consuming. I mean, can either of you speak to what is the challenges as being a new parent leader?
So I would say it's really funny when Melissa and I were talking before this that we both agreed that finding enough time in the day to focus on this group is our greatest challenge. And new parents is, it's something that we created together. And so this is so near and dear to us and so important to us. And so, it's a struggle at times to find enough time in the day to devote to this and to our members who are also very important to us. Our day jobs are, we're both directors. And so, at times in our roles, that is a 40 or more hour a week commitment. And you have to sort of find time, and often for me at least, I don't know about Melissa, but that's at night or on the weekends to do NU parents related things. I think it also sometimes can be a bit of a struggle because we both have elementary and middle school age children, and I think anyone who has children of those ages can probably relate with the number of commitments after school that are part of our lives, and also, just the social and emotional support that kids that age need. And I want to be there for my kids, and I want to be an involved and active parent, and I know Melissa does too. And so it's just a matter of finding, the time to devote to all the things that we're passionate about and that we care about. So I think the only other thing I would say as far as a struggle is just coming up with new ideas for programming and for sessions. In the beginning, it was literally Melissa and I and Esther that were coming up with all the ideas, and we started surveying the group, which was very helpful to ask, what are you looking for? And, so we're not just kind of like pulling things out of a hat. What do you all need? What do you want? What do you want to learn about? And so that's been really helpful. And I think now that we have subgroup chairs and co-chairs, I think they're going to be really helpful with sort of brainstorming ideas moving forward as well for sessions and programming.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially if you're doing that many a year. You said maybe around 4 or 5 a year. That can be a lot too. So yeah, time is like the trend for us working parents. There's just not enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And it's also, I forgot to say this part, but like sourcing your network, right? So if you have people who say, we want to learn about financial stability, or I had to reach out to a couple of people that I know do financial advising as their jobs and ask them, would you be interested in coming in and speaking to our group, and, what if I don't know anyone in that space? So I think that's another part of it too, is coming up with, valuable and effective speakers.
Yeah.
That also don't necessarily charge a very high amount because our budget is not huge.
I was going to ask if you're comfortable answering. I'm assuming there's a budget laid out from the university for each of the affinity groups. Is that, and we don't need to go into specifics, but is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes. Okay. So we are given a very appreciated budget. It's not huge, but it is very helpful. And, we're able to compensate our speakers with a couple $100
Yeah.
fee,
Yeah.
and that's enough to get someone in the
Yeah.
door. And oftentimes when we're bringing speakers into, it's an opportunity for them to get their brand out, right? So there's a benefit to them as well.
For sure. Yeah.
We do
So
really
the-
want
Go
swag
ahead.
at some point. We want to have some NU parents swag.
That
So
Oh,
I would
uh,
have worn, if I had a T-shirt, I would have worn it today.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that sounds so fun! I know.
Yeah.
I want moms with benefits swag too. I'm
Love
like one
that.
day that yeah. I'll send you guys some.
Great.
Have swag, you've hit it big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Even if it's just for myself, I'll just
Right, exactly. An order of 2, please.
yeah, right. Awesome. Okay, so if you had to say what kind of the most impactful resources are that the NU Parents gives or puts on, whatever, what would be, your top list?
It's a good one. I mean, we were just talking about some of the sessions, and so some of the great speakers that we've brought in have been around topics like healthy eating, gender stereotypes, as Allison mentioned, financial planning. We did something on pandemic parenting. We had a great speaker who also has a podcast, so shout out to them, called Pandemic Parenting. And we also did something with Northeastern, so senior leaders at Northeastern who are parents themselves, and how they were able to sort of balance that career and parenting kind of to make it where they are today. So we're really kind of tapping into lots of different types of resources. And as Allison mentioned, we're moms ourselves, but our ages, the ages of our children, like, we're not as tapped into the infant toddler phase as we used to be. And so that's where we're kind of surveying our members and trying to, like, what are people worried about right now? Like, what kind of things can we help you with? And obviously we're not at high school yet. So learning from people that have done, have kids now who are in high school, and what are they thinking about? And it's really helpful. That's where we get to become really, like, I mean, of course we're always learning from each other, but seeing kind of what's to come is also really important. So I would say the sessions for sure. We talked a lot about just the advocacy things that we're so proud of. And then, I think just like the general, like, when you think about resources, like, we're all resources to each other. And so to have that, like, at our fingertips, and it can range from, crowdsourcing on something like what camps are still open, like in the area, or what books should my 4-year-old read. I mean, it acts like a social media platform in that way, where you're able to get kind of like instant feedback, and maybe some really cool events that Northeastern's sponsoring that we didn't always hear about because, we're on and off campus, and, the whole, like, flyers on a wall doesn't really work anymore. So kind of finding out, like, what's going on campus, what's going on in neighboring towns that might be of interest to our kids. So that's kind of where the crowdsourcing and knowledge sharing is really important.
I love that the flyers on the wall doesn't necessarily work anymore. I feel like that's a great analogy for anybody who went to college,
Right.
one, but also any, employers that typically had the flyers of happy hours and announcements, like in this social media day and age, and the way we engage with each other online. It's just not the way we typically default to communication. So that makes sense. I mean, you guys are doing so much, and it feels like you all must be really great listeners to listen to the parents that are part of the NU Parents. You all must be, I think, really creative, because you're continually coming up with new ideas of how to listen and how to execute on the problems or the focus areas that your fellow members want to focus on. And so this really great, I think, soft skills, if you will, that are just awesome. So really, really inspiring from where I'm sitting. To that end, we have at Moms with Benefits, we have a lot of listeners that are either currently expecting, or they're trying to navigate postpartum, trying to return to paid work. They are kind of young moms or moms with young kids. And so they're really fresh into motherhood is the word I like to use. Very, very fresh. And so they're entering motherhood, and there's a lot of things hitting them. And so for those listeners, and also for the listeners that are maybe more into their motherhood journey, but still trying to figure out and navigate their relationship with being a working parent and the pushes and pulls of all of that, do you have recommendations of how those listeners might be able to enact change within their own organization? So I feel like you guys are kind of like the the gold star case study of from start to finish the last 10 plus years. You've done an incredible amount of things. Any advice to those that are looking to get this started or looking to move their organization just another step forward with change and supporting working parents?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the key, what you just said, is that it has been 10 plus years, right? So change doesn't happen overnight. And so I think that for Melissa and I, again, it wasn't something that we started off saying like, we need change at Northeastern and we're going to start this group. It was really organic. But I think that if someone is listening to this and they are thinking like, my organization doesn't have an ERG for parents and I want to start one, I think I would give them the advice, number one, that finding a few people to work with on this rather than doing it completely alone is a very high recommendation that I would have. I think, many heads are better than one. That's the number one thing. But also, it can honestly be a little bit nerve-wracking when you're going to the very, very top senior leadership of your organization. Northeastern is really large. I wouldn't have wanted to have these conversations by myself, quite honestly. And I always appreciated having Melissa by my side and Esther by my side, having these discussions. And so that would be my first thing is find a group of people that you want to work on this and sort of trying to get it off the ground and know that it does take time. Kind of going back to what I had said earlier, if you can go with an idea and sort of a plan for how you're going to do it, I think that senior leadership at an organization is going to take you more seriously and appreciate that you're trying to be that change agent through something positive rather than coming and having a complaint. That's the way that we've been successful, I think, in all these years, is always having respectful conversations with those that we need to have these conversations with and coming up with realistic and implementable ideas and solutions.
And I know we've mentioned Esther, and Esther actually started another affinity group at Northeastern, which is why she's not a part of this conversation today. And she's doing, it's called JAG, it's the Jewish Affinity Group. And so that is now up and running at Northeastern. And then just the other day, one of my coworkers mentioned their interest in starting more of like an elder care affinity group. And that's something that like I'm excited about just because there's such a need, and that is another great example of where community and knowledge sharing is so important. And so just kind of props to Northeastern for giving, our community space to kind of connect and learn from each other. And yeah, so it's kind of exciting just to see, we're one of many affinity groups at Northeastern, but yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job. And I'm realizing it more and more as we're kind of telling the story in this space.
I also thought of one more thing too. When we've been trying to affect change, so the parental leave, right, is one example. It has always been really helpful if you can look at institutions or organizations that are similar in size to you and look at what their benefits are. Basically matchmates is what they call them. And so that's really helpful that if you kind of do that legwork in advance of a meeting with senior leadership and show that you've done your homework and that, X, Y, and Z companies all have this benefit and we don't, and this would make us more competitive, against our peers, I think that is something that, that our chief HR officer appreciates that very much and really does. She's a good listener. That's something else that's really important, is to sort of look across and see what other institutions and organizations are doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like the competitive analysis of it, especially in today's kind of.
That's the word I was looking
for. Yeah. And so can I ask a follow-up question of, when we're thinking about supporting working parents at an organizational level, you all have, your ERG and affinity group, you have paid leave to support working parents, and you have the kind of the programs on an annual basis that are rolled out. Are there other kind of specific policies or specific benefits or specific kind of items that you feel are part of that puzzle? Part of what I'm getting at is supporting working parents feels like some of it's kind of systemic benefits, policies, some of it's culture. And so, like, are there other things that you would add to the system list or the culture list?
Well, something else I should mention that Northeastern has is the Children's Center. And that I put my kids through there, and that is an amazing preschool. And so I would say that, any organization, I know that it's a big lift and a big ask, and there's a lot involved with like licensing and things like that, but that preschool was huge. I got to drive in and out every day with my kids for 3 years, and that was before pre-COVID. So I was doing that 5 days a week. And so it was, yes, it was a lot to drive in and out with my child, but they got used to it, and you bring a lot of snacks and you play a lot of good tunes and it's great. But, that was time with them when they were little that I will never get back. So I'm really grateful for that. I think also another, it's not really a benefit that Northeastern put into place for working parents, but the hybrid work schedule that directly came from post-COVID is huge for parents. Yes. And so, I can't tell you how life-changing this has been for me personally, and I think I can speak for Melissa as well.
Absolutely.
Just taking out 2 hours a day from my commute, 2 to 3 days a week, I get that time back with my kids. And I can go to their recitals and I can go to their games. And whereas before I couldn't, we were dividing and conquering and begging grandparents for help. And, we don't have to do that as much anymore. And so I personally think that any organization that is considering, I'm going to go rogue here, but, is considering mandating people to come back to the office 5 days a week, I personally think that they should seriously consider how positive the hybrid schedules have become for working parents. And let's be honest, a lot of the working parents, we're in the very experienced category at this point, being into our 40s and sort of having a lot of life experience and a lot of work experience to offer. And you wouldn't want to lose employees for that reason, because they had flexibility and now they don't. I'm hearing a lot of that on various platforms of mandating people to come back 5 days a week, and I just keep shaking my head. I think that Northeastern has done the right thing.
I agree.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
And just to kind of add to that, so I have one kid who is almost 13 and one who is almost 9. And so my almost 13-year-old was, when I had her as a baby, obviously I had gone back to work. I was in the office pretty much every day, commute really long. I would not see her in the morning. And then I would come home and I'd be home around 5:30, 6 o'clock. And so my son, who, he was probably 2 when COVID hit, so he doesn't really remember anything before. All he remembers is that I was always home for breakfast and I could drive him to school and then start work and sometimes even pick him up, if I had that little block in the day. And so it's very interesting on the days that I do go into work. He's like, what? You're not working from home? It's just funny how 2 kids can have such different experiences, but the quality of life, and I think I'm doing a great job still. It's not like there's any slack in that, it's I'm only getting, honestly, to be, I think, a better worker for Northeastern. But yeah, it's really interesting to see just the differences in both of my kids' experiences, but I'm only, doing the same job, if not more, with my second.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And then it feels like it does come full circle. If you as an employee feel valued and feel understood, if you can actually execute a hybrid workplace, policy or setup, whatever you want to call it, that is just going to, reap the rewards right back into the organization, because you're going to have more fulfilled employees. You're going to be having more employees that feel like they are quote unquote balanced and have time with their family as well as their work. And so it feels like a no-brainer, but it, for some reason, maybe not so much for other people. So I am curious. I've been watching kind of the trend there too. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you want to share before we sign off today?
I don't think so, other than to say thank you for inviting us to be on with you. This was, this is such an exciting opportunity for Melissa and I, and especially where we've been working on this for so long. This is just sort of a realization for me about how far we've come, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I know Melissa does too.
I thank you so much for being on here. I'm a mom, 1 year postpartum, and trying to figure out how to make this whole working mom thing work. And so I just get really, really inspired that, people like Allison and Melissa are out there that have made such progress in organizations and been those change agents. And I look forward to figuring out how to do the same for myself and anybody else and any other individuals or organizations that Moms with Benefits helps. So really, really appreciate your time today and you talking about the NU Parents group.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.